are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back. It's another crossover edition of the Locked On Cowboys and Locked On Washington Football Team podcast. I am Marcus Mosher. Today, I am joined by the fantastic David Harrison, who also does a little bit of work for Locked On Bucs, but we're not going to talk about them today. We're talking about the NFC East, the Cowboys and the Washington Football Team. David, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, Marcus. Looking forward to a great NFC East divisional matchup. The first of 5 for Washington. I think it's the first of 5 for both teams, actually, isn't it?
Dallas has 4, right? They've played
okay.
the Eagles and Giants, but they play just a bunch of division games coming up. So you guys are going to see a lot of NFC East action here over the next month. But David, let's talk about your Washington team because Washington's playing really well, right? 4 straight wins, I believe, a win over your Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They beat my Raiders this weekend. So tell us, what's been the key for Washington, getting all these wins?
Running the football has been the key for Washington getting these wins. And you go back to that win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, their first win coming out of the bye. Nobody gave them a chance. Even, Chris and myself on the Locked On Washington Football Team podcast, we even told the fans, like, listen, we would all love for the Washington Football Team to pull this upset off. We just can't see it happening the way they were playing football heading into the bye. But they came out leaning on the run game. The defense had been getting incrementally better, even going into the bye week, and they kind of had a larger step in that game specifically. And that's really where you kind of see the emergence of them just leaning on the rush. And as of right now, anytime Taylor Heineke throws 35 passes or fewer in a single game, the Washington only has 1 loss, and that's at him as a starter. So not including that Los Angeles Chargers game where he came in relief of Ryan Fitzpatrick. But in games where he throws more than 35 passes, they have a losing record, and that's where most of their losses come from. Now, obviously, some of that is anecdotal, right? Because if you're trailing, you're going to throw more. But a lot of that, when you look at the stats and how they translate on the field, it's become the mantra of the team to rely on Antonio Gibson, J.D. McKissic when he is healthy. He missed last week. Hopefully, he's going to be back this week. I'm not 100% confident that he'll be back, but we'll see what happens on that front. But even Jarrett Patterson, and then they brought in some other running backs, to kind of help out. If Washington's defense can keep the Dallas Cowboys from scoring, that's pretty much how they like to do, is keep the game a low-scoring affair, lean on the run, control the clock, and minimize the damage either quarterback can do to Washington's chances of winning.
I want to talk about Logan Thomas. So last week was rough. We both watched that game. The Yannick Ngakoue play is just so unnecessary. And I know it's not necessarily a what do you want to call it? A play that he's not supposed to make. It's just unnecessary, right? Like Ngakoue rolled right into Logan Thomas's knee, and now it sounds like he's out for the season, correct?
Yeah, he just got put on IR Wednesday morning.
It's tough because he is really a good player, and he's really transformed himself into one of the better tight ends in the league. So my question for you is, without Logan Thomas in the lineup, we know what Terry McLaurin's going to do. Who is the other guy that's going to help create some chunk plays in the passing game?
So Curtis Samuel's return has shown some new wrinkles to the Washington offense. I expect them to come out with a few more this weekend against the Dallas Cowboys as Curtis continues to get in kind of into rhythm. We're seeing them allow Taylor Heineke to move a little bit more by design, not really doing a lot of run plays, but we have seen some run option plays. We have seen there was a beautiful play action bootleg pass that they had with Taylor early in the game against the Las Vegas Raiders. Would love to see more of that. And you kind of get the feeling that Scott Turner's trying to kind of roll this stuff out a little bit as it goes. But the return of Curtis Samuel really allows the Washington offense to do a lot more motion, a lot more misdirection. You see some play action where they're running the ball, but they'll fake it to Curtis on a sweep or a jet, and then they'll give it, to JD or Antonio, whoever it is that ends up running with the football. And just little things that make the defense either hesitate for a second or anticipate something. And those always open the door to like a backdoor cut or a play action later on down the line. And those are kind of the things that you want to see in this chess match that is football. And Scott Turner really kind of starting, I think, to customize the offense a little bit to Taylor Heineke. I don't think he did that as much earlier in the season because I think there was just always this anticipation that eventually Ryan Fitzpatrick would come back. And while Fitzpatrick has underrated athleticism, nobody's going to call him an athletic quarterback. He can move. You just don't want to make him move. You know what I mean? Whereas Taylor, you can actually design some movement there and actually play to his strengths a little bit, because I think the more he thinks about the pass, that he's throwing. And that's where he actually tends to get in trouble. And then Ricky Seals-Jones, I mean, he's a side end that nobody outside of Washington really talks about, but got a lot of experience filling in when Logan Thomas was injured. At first was injured last week. Unfortunately, would have loved to see Logan Thomas and Ricky on the field at the same time. Rookie John Bates, the tight end from Boise State, has actually done really well, and he's actually grown like right in front of our eyes almost weekly. You can see him getting better, especially as a receiving threat. So there are some players there that help this offense be a little bit more dynamic. The big one to get back, though, this weekend will be J.D. McKissic if he does return.
I did see that J.D. McKissic was at least back on the practice field on Wednesday, so that's a good sign that he might be available. Let's talk about Taylor Heinicke, because I know on this podcast we've called him the most overqualified like backup quarterback in the league. Like, he's too good to be a backup, but I'm not sure he's going to be a long-term franchise quarterback. So let me ask you, what are your thoughts on Taylor Heinicke, not for just this game, but going forward?
As a story, he's great. You love the guy, you love the story, you love the determination, the grit. Not just from Taylor. I mean, there was a point he talked about this earlier in the season that he had given up. He was actually reaching out to Scott Turner to see if he could become a coaching intern or get onto the coaching trail. And yeah, he was ready to give up trying to achieve his dreams of being a starting NFL quarterback. It was actually his family. I think his sister and his brother-in-law down in Atlanta, he was sleeping on their couch, and his brother-in-law used to wake him up and get him moving and say, no, get up, get off your butt. You're not going to sulk. You're not, so when he went down to Atlanta and won that game for Washington, that was a huge moment for him. So the story is beautiful. But something that, I got to interview assistant running backs coach Jennifer King for the Washington football team earlier this season. And she said something about Jarrett Patterson being more than a story. And I think that's such a great thing to remember. And I think Taylor Heinicke is the same thing. He's more than a great story, because as great as a story is, he has grown in so many different ways just this season alone. And a lot of people have pointed out he's basically a rookie coming in. His first regular season start was this season, week 2, replacing Ryan Fitzpatrick. Even as a 28, almost 29-year-old, that's really kind of amazing thing to think about. But the development has been there. You just haven't seen enough yet to think that Taylor Heinicke is the kind of quarterback that can carry a team. Now, that's okay if you don't need him to carry your team. That's really where Washington, I think, has to make some decisions. And I go back to Joe Flacco and the Baltimore Ravens, right? We always have this conversation over franchise quarterbacks. Well, Joe Flacco for the Baltimore Ravens for a good amount of years, 5, 6, 7 years, was a franchise quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens. Why? Because they won on defense and running the ball. They didn't need Joe Flacco to carry the day for them. Now, once they did, we kind of saw what happened there. And Taylor Heinicke, it got ugly there for a little bit. I don't think Taylor is the quarterback, and I'm not sure his ceiling ever gets to the point where he can be the quarterback that, like the Russell Wilson type or Patrick Mahomes type, to carry a team into victory. But I think he could be a Joe Flacco type, not from a operational standpoint, but from the team role mentality. And if Washington wants to push all their chips in on defense, continue to build the running game, with the offensive line and their running backs and all that, then I think Taylor Heinicke is a quarterback that they could potentially roll into 2022 with, if he continues what we've seen. Now, if he goes back to, throwing incredibly dangerous passes and multiple interceptions a game here through the last stretch when the pressure is on against the NFC East, that picture is going to change a little bit. But really, it's just, what does Ron Rivera want this team to be, and can Taylor Heinicke fit that role?
It's not a perfect comparison, but like Case Keenum when he was with Minnesota, right? Like somebody who can get you to the playoffs and win you games if everything else is really good. I think, I do think that's possible. All right, last question for you before we switch this around. The defense, with Chase Young and Montez Sweat, they really struggled. Now that they're both out, they're playing well. Now, I know it's not because of those guys, because those two guys are really good, but what's changed since those guys have kind of left the lineup?
Honestly, it's playing within the defense. Jack Del Rio mentioned it. Jack is a guy that doesn't want to give. You mentioned the Raiders and all that. So Raiders fans know, the Raiders media know, Jack's not going to give you anything he doesn't have to give you. So he doesn't really come out with it a whole lot. But he did mention players not playing their assignments, kind of getting outside of their lanes and trying to do a little bit too much to be the guy to make the play. And head coach Ron Rivera has a great saying that I absolutely love hearing, and that is that the play doesn't care who makes it, right? So like a touchdown pass doesn't care if it's Amari Cooper or if it's 6th-round draft pick that you've never heard of catching the football for the Dallas Cowboys. The play just needs to be made. For the Washington football team, they had so many young potential playmakers on the team that wanted to be the guy. They wanted to be the hero. They wanted to make the play to spark their team. And that's a great mentality to have, great motivation to have. But sometimes that causes you to do things off script that cause the rest of the things that happen around you to break down. And that's what we were seeing a little bit with Montez Sweat and Chase Young. I think more with Chase Young than Montez. Chase is trying to live up to that billing, live up to the hype and everything. maybe just trying to do a little bit too much, setting up an outside rush when he's got an inside fill, and then he doesn't get back in time, and the ball carrier gets loose. Things like that. With Casey Toohill and Shaka Toney and James Smith Williams filling in defensive end positions, what you see is three edge setters really kind of in tandem, really Toohill and Shaka Toney. That if my job is to set the edge, I'm going to set the edge. If my job is to push the running back into the line of scrimmage, I'm going to do that. And they don't go out there and really freelance a whole lot. So while they don't have necessarily the athletic talent and the ceiling that those guys have in Montez and Chase, they're just doing their job and playing within the defense and trusting the guys around them to also do that. And that, I think, is a big part of why this defense has gotten better. And the hope is that as they're having to watch, that they're kind of seeing that you can be a playmaker without necessarily making the highlight play and really help your team be a lot better. Montez Sweat, we were hoping to get him back this week. It looked like he was on track to come face the Dallas Cowboys, which would have been huge. But as of Wednesday morning, he's been put on the COVID-19 reserve list, and now he's going to be out for 10 days.
Defense has been really good lately. 17 points to Denver, 19 points to Tampa Bay, 15 to Seattle, 15 to the Las Vegas Raiders. Yeah. The Cowboys are going to have their hands full in this matchup for sure. Let's go ahead and flip this around. Let's have you ask me some questions about the Dallas Cowboys, who have been a little up and down themselves over the last, 2 months. So what you got for me, David?
Well, I want to start in the same place that we started with a lot of conversations. That's quarterback. I mean, most important position on the field, and you guys have Dak Prescott, and it's kind of a weird dynamic, man. I always tell my audiences, both on Locked on Washington and Locked on Bucks, and I'm a football fan before I'm a fan of any one team, and I'm more of a people fan than anything. I love Dak Prescott's, again, his story of being undersold, and it kind of reminds me of Russell Wilson a little bit of, well, he's this and he's that, and he can't, and people kind of forget the heart and the leadership and the lion that it takes to win football games. So coming out of the NFL draft, I was much higher on Dak than a lot of people were. As we've gone on, though, people have gotten higher on Dak in the NFL than I am. I don't think Dak is this revolutionary franchise-leading quarterback that honestly, I don't want to say deserves the money he's getting from a personal standpoint, but from a team construction standpoint, and what a cap hit like that dedicated to one position does to building the rest of your team. Am I wrong there? Am I right there? What is Dak been? Because I go back to last season when he got injured and everybody said, oh, derailed the entire Cowboys season. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. The Dallas Cowboys weren't doing all that well from a win-loss perspective when he got hurt in the first place. You see the team win 5 in a row after losing to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and everybody says this is the Dak Prescott Dallas Cowboys we expected. But now they've lost 3 of the last 5. I think health obviously has something to go into that. So what's been going in with this kind of like Jekyll and Hyde type of situation with the Cowboys of dominating early in the season, now kind of, I don't say struggling, but 2 and 3 in your last 5 games, obviously you're not dominating anymore.
Yeah, so we could turn this into like an hour discussion.
Yeah,
just on Dak. So I always look at things from a quarterback perspective. When quarterbacks are struggling, is there a reason for their struggles, or is it an excuse? Because if you're looking for excuses, well, Dak had a calf injury. Amari Cooper missed 2 games. And even last week when he was back, he wasn't healthy. CeeDee Lamb missed a game and a half because of a concussion. I think those are all legitimate excuses, right? And reasons why he's struggling. But I think Dak would tell you he's just not seeing things as clearly as he did early in the season. They've had a lot of turnover on their offensive line. They've had a lot of guys in and out of the lineup. There just hasn't been really any continuity at all. And when you play 3 games in 12 days like they did, you can't really solve a lot. So the hope is that with this 10-day break, they last played on Thursday, they can kind of get things solved. They're going to have their full starting offense for the first time this season. When I say starting offense, I mean Amari Cooper is going to play as many snaps as he usually would. I think he's going to play well. But yeah, I think he's been a little bit off, and I just don't think he's seeing things as clearly as he did early on in the year. And it's something to be a little bit concerned about, but I don't think it's going to derail their season.
Yeah, I don't think when I watch Dak, I don't think he's off as Russell Wilson has been as of late. I know they just got a big win over the 49ers, but kind of leading up to that game and what we saw against Washington, a very, very inconsistent quarterback right now in Russell Wilson. I don't see that level of disconnect in Dak Prescott. Obviously, you just kind of.
And this is what I would say, David, really quickly. Just like he's still completing a high percentage of his passes, and if you go watch the tape, he's pretty accurate. Like he's not missing throws. What he's missing is instead of throwing a 3-yard out to Cedric Wilson on 3rd and 4, Amari Cooper's wide open down the field for a 40-yard play.
Yeah.
It's those type of plays that he's missing and not seeing. And I think that's been the difference, because early in the year, he was hitting on every single one of them. I think that's what the Cowboys offense is missing right now.
And this is going to be one of those weeks earlier in the season. Washington fans and media, like, we were all kind of, it was kind of like a woe is me type of situation week in, week out, because it just seemed like whatever was ailing a certain team, they would face the Washington football team and all of the things would get better. Josh Allen looked like an MVP candidate again with the Buffalo Bills the week they faced Washington, and then really hasn't looked up to that par really since that game. So this could be that situation. The Washington football team has been susceptible to deep passes being completed against him. William Jackson has been kind of hot and cold. Sometimes he's great in coverage. Sometimes he's just mugging guys and drawing flags left and right. Do you expect this to be a game where Dak does challenge down the field more against this defensive secondary? And I know you said that the entire starting offense is going to be playing for the first time really this season, so that's obviously good news towards the health. But how healthy are those receivers really? Because I know that's had a big impact as well.
Yeah, this is as healthy as they've been all season. Amari did play last week against the Saints, but he was not in shape at all after coming off the COVID list. Sounds like he's ready to go. Michael Gallup had a calf injury, still kind of working his way back from that. He's good to go. He's not on the injury report this week. And then CeeDee Lamb was dealing with a couple things, including concussion. He's ready to go. So I do think the Cowboys are going to challenge Washington deep. Because they have their full offensive line, I think Prescott's going to feel comfortable, taking the time to set up and throw the ball down the field. It should be a game in which Dallas tries to attack Washington because, as you mentioned, that's where you can kind of get them. And we've seen some coverage breaks, and busts from Washington this year. Right. I think the Cowboys would be wise to attack them early and often down the field.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the approach I would take. If I was the Dallas Cowboys facing the defense, that's the approach I would take. And if you're successful in doing so, you're going to potentially put up some points and put pressure on quarterback Taylor Heinicke. And I kind of want to flip a similar question onto you. Close to the team, you know how this goes. Closer to the team, you always kind of have a little bit of a different insight or different view of what's going on around the logo, around the brand. What's it look like from the outside with Taylor Heinicke and the Washington football team? I mean, is there, we have the Heinicke hive here in the DMV and amongst the Washington fans. Is there this belief? I mean, we were in the Locked On NFL DM there on Twitter, and I mean, there were some guys saying that they would rather take Taylor over their specific quarterback right now. I don't think Dak is in that conversation, but there were some surprises. I'm not going to out anybody for their.
I think you should. That would be great if you did.
But there were some hosts where I was like, you would give up your guy for Taylor right now, and I was a little bit surprised by some of that. What is the outside view of Taylor Heinicke right now?
Yeah, I think Heinicke is somebody who can put together some long drives, and I think 2 or 3 times a game you're going to be just stunned at some of the plays that he can make and getting out of pressure and connecting on some wild throws. But I think, and we saw it even last week against the Raiders, like you're going to have your chances to pick him off. And I think back to the final drive of the game. I mean, you got to give credit to Taylor Heinicke for getting Washington down there in field goal range to win it. Yeah. But Trevon Merrick, the rookie safety for the Raiders, had the game in his hands. Heinicke just threw a bad ball and he dropped it. So he's going to give you some chances. You've got to take advantage of it if you're the Cowboys. But if you just let him sit back there and get comfortable, I do think he's certainly talented enough to make enough plays to win this game.
Yeah, Trevon Merrick, one of my favorite guys coming out of the draft. I think he had visions of that ball sitting on his mantle a little too soon.
He's got to be sick. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Final question, Marcus, looking at the defensive side of the ball, I think that's really where Dallas's problems, from a consistency standpoint, I've kind of bet 14th against the rush. So a lot of people say that and say, oh, well, Washington might have their hands full, but they're 24th per run play in the NFL, giving up 4.5 yards almost per carry. So it seems a little bit like there's a disparity there. People just not running maybe as much against the Dallas Cowboys as much as they're having success on a per run basis. Fully expect Washington to come out and run the ball here. How do you feel about them stopping Antonio Gibson? A little bit bigger than the people I think maybe give him credit for, but not exactly a bruiser. Like he's not going to bring back, memories of Josh Jacobs with the New York Giants or anything, but a little bit harder of a runner than a lot of people give him. How do you feel about this defense facing the Washington offense? Because I feel like this is a race to 20. I feel like the first team to hit 20 is going to win this game. If neither team hits 20, kind of like what's been happening in the last few games for Washington, the closest to it is going to win.
Dallas should know Antonio Gibson very well because he torched them on Thanksgiving last year. I mean, he just had a monster game. I really think that was the coming out party for Antonio Gibson. So it's not surprising though that both teams' best running back is from Memphis. Just throwing that out there. I do think you can run on Dallas. I think that's one thing that the Cowboys will concede because they don't want to give up big plays in the passing game. They'll they're fine with teams trying to put together 12 and 13 play drives because they believe ultimately when you get to the red zone, they're going to make stops. And if you're kicking field goals, that's a recipe for success for Dallas because they're going to be scoring touchdowns on the other end. At least they have been before the last month or so. But I do think Washington will have success. I will say this about the Cowboys defense. They've never been healthier. Going into this game, it's the first time all year they're going to have DeMarcus Lawrence, Randy Gregory, and Neville Gallimore on their defensive line. And why that's so important is, number one, those guys are really good. DeMarcus Lawrence is a Pro Bowl caliber player every time he plays. And number two, that allows Micah Parsons to go back to an off-the-ball linebacker role, which could help stop the run and can help be a little bit more disruptive in the middle of the field. So the Cowboys are healthy. I expect them with 10 days off to look fresh, to play well in this game. And I do agree with you. I think it's going to be a little bit of a struggle for both offenses in this game. And if you can score 21, 24 points, you'll probably win.
Absolutely, Marcus. Either way, I think it's going to be a good game, and we're going to learn a lot about what's going to happen in the NFC here, in the NFC East here pretty soon. I mean, I think for the fan of late season theatrics, everybody wants Washington to win because you come within a game of the NFC East title. Each of them goes out, plays another game. I know Washington's got Philly, and then they come back and potentially come back the next week after that for a title match. I mean, it's not going to clinch anything necessarily, but potentially all the chips on the line. Dallas Cowboys, a watch football team. I don't know if football gets any better. Marcus, I appreciate your time. Appreciate the conversation. Look forward to doing it again very soon. Good luck this weekend.
Absolutely, David. We'll see you in just a couple weeks.
Yes, sir.